When I was old enough to be home alone but still quite young, I lived in a quiet court within a lower-end, middle-class neighborhood. This was a small, developing town right before the city's growth boom, with only one grocery store at its center. It was the kind of place where kids played from sunrise to late in the dark of night, without many worries. To provide some context, my court formed a U shape with about 8 houses. There was only one way in and out, and my friend and I, who I'll call Ashley, lived across the street from each other just before the curve of the U. We were both 3 houses away from the exit. The street near our court wasn't very busy, and we could play on the main street for hours without encountering anyone who didn't live in our court. It was a quiet area, and not many people had reasons to pass by our court, as there were more convenient routes to other homes. I should also mention that Ashley's parents were unfriendly and didn't like people coming to their house, so we usually hung out at my place or within our court. This detail becomes important later in the story. It was Halloween, and I had decided to stay home and go trick-or-treating in our neighborhood with Ashley, who lived across the street. It was late, and most kids had gone home hours ago. The streets were eerily silent, except for us. My family had gone to one of the wealthier neighborhoods to get king-size chocolate bars, and they planned to spend the evening at a friend's house before coming home late, or even spending the night elsewhere. I didn't want to hang out with my younger siblings and their friends, so I asked my mom if I could stay home alone. She agreed on the condition that I'd lock the house as soon as she returned. I agreed. It was close to 10 or 11 at night, and everything was going smoothly until Ashley's parents called her inside for bed. Ashley and I were sitting on the curb in front of my house, just talking, which was common for kids our age. That's when we noticed a middle-aged man passing by the end of our court. He paused, looking around as he walked, and then he noticed us. He slowed down and stared at us for a moment. It wasn't a big deal, but something about him seemed off. I remember him clearly because he stood out in our small town, where everyone knew everyone, and I didn't recognize him. He was a white man with an average build and a beer belly, and even in the darkness, I could make out his appearance under the streetlights. He didn't look like a local. Ashley asked me if I knew him, and I shook my head. We continued talking, but something about the man made Ashley keep an eye on the court's entrance. "He's walking by again," Ashley would repeat when she noticed him passing by multiple times. The man wasn't dressed for a long walk or a jog. He was wearing a tan jacket, dark blue jeans, and what appeared to be heavy work boots. It didn't seem like he was out for a leisurely stroll. But being young and naive, we initially ignored these red flags. That changed when he passed by for the 5th time, and we started feeling uneasy. "Hey, that guy passed again," Ashley frowned, and I turned my back to the court's entrance as we talked. This time he wasn't walking anymore. He stood under the streetlight at the entrance of our court, on the same side as us, and he was just staring at me. I remember how odd he looked, attempting to act casual by shoving his hands into his pockets, but his unwavering gaze was anything but casual. We became creeped out as he kept glancing around the empty street and then back at me. He finally continued walking past our court. He didn't look menacing, but something about his intense gaze left us uneasy. "I'm creeped out. Let's go inside before he comes back," Ashley said. We decided to leave since the man had moved on. I walked her across the street to her home, as I was the responsible friend who always ensured everyone got home safely. This is where things take a disturbing turn. I walked Ashley to her house across the street and then headed back to my home. Everything seemed fine, and I was eager to get inside. I turned the doorknob of my front door, attempting to enter my house, but the knob refused to turn. I remember holding my breath as I struggled to open the door. That's when I realized I didn't have a house key. The door was never locked unless we were inside and sleeping. This was before cell phones, and my family had accidentally locked me out with no way to reach them. Panic set in. I was locked outside with the creepy man wandering around. I was terrified. I moved away from the front door and tried to calm myself. I decided to go through the backyard and attempt to enter through our sliding glass doors, which should not have been locked. I walked down the path from my front door, intending to go around the front of my house to the side gate. That was my plan. I suddenly stopped, my breath catching in my throat, as I noticed the man standing in front of the end of our street again. There was no way he had completed a full lap around our court to end up there. He must have pretended to keep walking. His eyes locked onto me, and he flashed a smile, raising his hand in a casual greeting, before he started walking toward me. His steps were casual, as if he were just taking a leisurely stroll, but his unwavering gaze was fixed on me. I panicked at his approach and sprinted across the street to Ashley's house, abandoning any attempt to break into my own home. I remember thinking that Ashley's house was the only one with signs of life, and I needed an adult right away. I ran as fast as I could, reached her front door, and pounded on it in a state of panic, repeatedly pressing the doorbell. Ashley opened the door, looking confused by my frantic expression. "I'm locked out, Ashley, and he's coming," I screamed, trying to push my way inside, filled with fear. I need to ask my mom," Ashley responded, closing the door. She probably didn't realize the seriousness of the situation. I remember crying as the door was slammed in my face. In my panic, I turned around to see how close the man had come while my back was turned. He had resumed walking around the court when the door closed. Now, he was only about 1.5 houses away from me. When he saw me with the door closed, he stopped his casual walk on the sidewalk and began running toward me diagonally, heading straight for me. I recall turning halfway to press the doorbell repeatedly in what felt like an eternity of fear. That's when Ashley opened the door, grabbed my arm, and yanked me inside, slamming the door shut and locking it. I was in tears as she held onto my arm. Desperately, we rushed to the side windows to see the man. He appeared angry as he stood just inches from where I had been. He shot me a menacing glare, his chest heaving, before slowly backing away from my friend's porch and down the walkway. He shoved his hands into his pockets, turned away from us, and continued walking out of our court. I don't remember much after that. I recall breaking down in tears as Ashley's mom came to my aid, realizing the situation was serious. The police were called, and I provided my statement. I stayed with Ashley until my parents returned shortly after the police left. Ashley's dad walked me home and explained everything. My mom hugged me, kissed me, and apologized, saying that my younger brother, who was only 8 at the time, must have locked the door because he was paranoid about strangers. After that incident, I didn't stay home alone until we moved to a new town several years later. I still remember that day vividly and can't fathom the man's intentions. Kidnapping? Something worse. To this day, I can't find an explanation that sits well with me. I still get paranoid, especially of smiling strangers, especially at night. This incident unfolds in the dimly lit memories of my past, a time when I was just 13 years old, and my family had recently embarked on a fresh start in a new town. I had recently struck up an unlikely friendship with a fellow schoolmate, setting the stage for an unforgettable Halloween adventure. You see, I thought I was growing too old for trick-or-treating, but the allure of free candy was too tempting to resist. My new friend and I, both on the cusp of adolescence, shared an unspoken agreement. We had one more year of trick-or-treating left in us. Little did we know that Halloween night would turn into a story that still haunts me to this day. Because we were both 13 and lived in a relatively safe neighborhood, My parents felt it was fine for us to go trick-or-treating without adult supervision. Everything was going great, and we were having fun, collecting some quality candy and so on. Then, we rang the doorbell of one guy's house. The porch light was on, and there were a couple of pumpkins, so we assumed the people inside were likely giving out candy. A middle-aged man answered the door. At first, I was relieved because he was dressed in costume and seemed happy to see my friend and me. I thought we were in for some top-notch candy. I can't even recall what candy he handed out, but I can remember what happened next. He asked us to come into his home, which was strange, but being 13, we didn't think much of it. Then he asked if he could take our photo. He explained that he enjoyed taking photos of kids every Halloween because he loved seeing their costumes. On one of his walls were several pictures of different random, unrelated children in Halloween costumes. At this point, even as a naive 13-year-old, I was starting to get a bit creeped out. However, I decided it was best not to upset the man, so I let him take the picture, thinking we could leave afterward. He took the photo of us and then pulled out a clipboard with a sheet of paper on it, covered in names written in childish handwriting. He said he liked the kids, whose pictures he took to sign their names so he could know who they were. By this point, we were both extremely creeped out. We should have just run away, but we were too conditioned not to be rude. I decided to sign a fake name. He looked at the paper, glanced back up at me, and then down at the paper. He repeated the fake name I'd given and nodded. Fortunately, after that, he didn't do anything more, and we were free to leave, but it certainly gave us the creeps. At the time, I thought he was just an eccentric guy, but as an adult looking back on the story, it seems much more sinister. I'm grateful that nothing bad happened to us and hope nothing bad happened to any other kids. Halloween, with all these costumed kids trick-or-treating in the dark, with minimal parental supervision, could be an opportunity for predators to get kids alone in their homes, with no one knowing the kids' whereabouts. Please stay safe out there, and have a happy Halloween. My street and the next street over have many young kids who go out trick-or-treating. While I was out shopping all day with my mum, we decided to pick up some sweets in case anyone came to our door. I had plans to go to the cinema to see Ouija with my boyfriend, so when I got home, I was getting myself ready to go out. My mum was busy putting the shopping away, so when the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who had to answer it. There were children from our street, the next one over, and some I couldn't recognize, as well as an adult at the end of the path. I guessed either a father or an older brother by their size. They were dressed all in black and had some sort of mask covering their face. But it wasn't anything I recognized from a movie or anything. Anyway, they all told me their jokes, and I gave them their treats, and they made their way back down the path and onto the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed that the guy with the kids was still standing at the end of my path. He hadn't noticed, and he wasn't watching the children either. He was looking right at me, and my skin started to crawl when I realized that he was just staring at me. I backed slowly into the house and watched him as he raised his hand and waved very slowly at me. I was about to call out to him when my mum came to the door to make sure I was all right, and he took off in the opposite way from the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and he left as soon as he realized that I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaked out and told my boyfriend all about it when he came to the house to pick me up. But I quickly forgot all about it when we were watching the movie. When I finally got home, it was getting really late, and trick-or-treating was well and truly over around here. When I got inside, my mum was just getting ready to take the dogs out for a walk so that they could do their last-minute business, and they would meet my dad on his way home from work. So I was going to be home alone. After my horrible encounter, as I posted here, I don't really like being home alone, but it's worse on Halloween. And it always has been. Anyway, I was home alone, and I grabbed some snacks and went up to my bedroom and onto my computer so that I could do some of my writing, scroll through Tumblr, and listen to music. After my first creepy encounter with the guys coming into my house and into my backyard, my dad bought a motion-censored light and attached it to the wall of our house, right outside my window. Normally, it will go off whenever a cat walks along our fence, but it will usually go off after a couple of minutes. I always know when the light has come on because it lights up my whole room, given where it's placed. While I was sitting at my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first because I knew that it would go off soon. But 5 minutes passed, and it still hadn't gone off. So I opened my blinds to have a look outside and see what was going on. My stomach almost fell out of my ass when I looked out and saw the creep from hours before sitting on the fence, waving at my window to keep the light on. His waving slowed down suddenly when he spotted me, and it was all seriously creepy again, and I didn't know what to do. I just got flashbacks from before. Luckily, I heard the front door open and my parents coming into the house with the dogs, so I rushed down the stairs and started screaming at them about the guy on the fence. My dad didn't question me. He just took the dogs and rushed through the house, threw the back door open and ran outside. Then I heard him shouting, "Get the fuck out of here, you creep! I'm gonna phone the police." Dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to call the police because I didn't want to relive the whole thing again. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget all about the whole night.